She looked different that night, and the millionaire realized he was falling for his best friend. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She shouldn't have worn that dress, but she did. The crimson silk caught every light in the penthouse as Harper Lewis stepped through the glass doors of Adrian's new office building. 20 floors above Seattle's glittering skyline, the launch party for Nexus Technologies pulsed with energy. Venture capitalists in tailored suits, tech reporters with sharp eyes, and models who draped themselves around successful men like expensive accessories. But Harper wasn't here for any of them. She was here because Adrian Collins had called her 3 times that morning, his voice carrying that familiar hint of nervous excitement she'd known since they were 12. "You have to come tonight, Harper. I need at least one real person in that room." She'd laughed then the same way she always did when he got dramatic. But now, standing in the elevator, with her reflection staring back from polished steel walls, she felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with nerves. The elevator chimed softly, and the doors slid open to reveal a world she'd only glimpsed in business magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Elliott Bay, where ferries moved like glowing toys across dark water. Waiters glided between clusters of guests, carrying champagne that probably cost more than Harper's monthly rent at the bookstore she managed in Capitol Hill. She took a breath and stepped forward, searching the crowd for the one face that had been constant in her life for 18 years. "Harper!" The voice came from behind her, deep, familiar, but somehow different. She turned, and her breath caught. Adrian Collins stood 3 feet away, wearing a charcoal suit that had clearly been tailored within an inch of its life. His dark hair was pushed back, revealing the sharp jawline that had only gotten more defined since college. But it was his eyes, those same green eyes that had convinced her to sneak out for late-night pizza runs and talked her through heartbreak and celebrated every small victory, that made her heart skip. Those eyes were looking at her like they'd never seen her before. "You came," he said, and there was something in his voice she couldn't quite place. "Of course I came." She smiled, the same easy smile she'd given him 1,000 times. "Someone has to make sure you don't get too big for your perfectly tailored suit." He laughed, but it sounded different, breathier. "You look—" He paused, his gaze traveling from her face to the way the red dress hugged her curves, then back to her eyes. "You look incredible." Heat rose in her cheeks. In all their years of friendship, Adrian had never looked at her like that, like she was a woman instead of just Harper, the girl who knew all his secrets and called him out on his nonsense. "Thanks," she managed. "You clean up pretty well yourself." A waiter appeared beside them with a tray of champagne. Adrian took 2 glasses, handing one to Harper, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The touch sent electricity up her arm, and from the way Adrian's eyes darkened slightly, she knew he felt it too. "So," she said, taking a sip to steady herself, "how does it feel to officially be a tech mogul?" Adrian's mouth quirked in that half-smile she knew so well. Terrifying, exciting, completely surreal. He gestured around them. 6 months ago, I was coding in my garage. Now, I've got investors throwing money at me and calling me the next big thing. "You were always going to be the next big thing," Harper said softly. "Even when you were that scrawny kid with thick glasses who spent lunch periods in the computer lab." "I wasn't scrawny," Adrian protested, but his smile widened. "I was aerodynamically efficient." Harper laughed, the sound cutting through the sophisticated hum of conversation around them. Several heads turned, and she noticed how other women in the room tracked Adrian's movement, their gazes sharp with interest. "It looks like you've got admirers," she murmured, nodding toward a stunning blonde in a black cocktail dress who was clearly waiting for an opportunity to approach. Adrian followed her gaze, then looked back at Harper with an expression she couldn't read. "I'm exactly where I want to be." The words hung between them, weighted with something that made Harper's pulse quicken. This was dangerous territory, the kind of moment that could change everything between them. She'd spent years carefully maintaining the boundaries of their friendship, telling herself that what she felt for Adrian was just friendship. Deep, abiding, sometimes overwhelming friendship. But the way he was looking at her now, like she was the most beautiful woman in the room, like she was the only woman in the room, that was definitely not friendship. "Adrian!" A voice cut through the moment like a blade. A man in an expensive suit approached, his smile predatory. "There you are. I've got some people I'd love you to meet." Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course." He turned to Harper, and she saw apology in his eyes. Don't go anywhere, okay? She nodded, watching as he was pulled into a circle of powerful-looking men who immediately surrounded him like sharks scenting blood. This was his world now. Deals and handshakes and conversations that could change the direction of entire industries. Harper moved toward the windows, champagne in hand, trying to process what had just happened between them. In 18 years of friendship, she'd never felt that kind of tension, that electric awareness that made her skin tingle and her thoughts scatter. She was so lost in her own head that she didn't notice someone approaching until a smooth voice spoke beside her. "You look like someone who doesn't belong here." Harper turned to see a woman about her own age, with dark skin and intelligent brown eyes behind elegant glasses. Her hair was styled in a chic bob, and her simple black dress probably cost more than Harper's car. "Is it that obvious?" Harper asked with a rueful smile. The woman laughed. "Only because you're the only person in this room who looks genuinely happy to be here. I'm Sage Mitchell, by the way. I run digital marketing for Nexus." "Harper Lewis. I'm a friend of Adrian's." "Ah." Sage's expression shifted, becoming more interested. "The famous Harper. I've heard about you." "Famous?" Harper raised an eyebrow. "That's news to me. Adrian talks about you all the time. Harper would find this funny." "Harper always says," Harper thinks. Sage studied her with frank curiosity. "I was starting to wonder if you were real, or just some idealized woman he'd invented." Heat flooded Harper's cheeks. "We've been friends since we were kids. He probably just—" "Honey," Sage interrupted gently. "The way that man just looked at you, that wasn't friendship." Before Harper could respond, the crowd shifted, and she caught sight of Adrian across the room. He was nodding at whatever the investor was saying, but his eyes kept finding her, even from 20 feet away. When their gazes met, everything else seemed to fade. The conversation, the party, the carefully constructed walls she'd built around her heart. Sage followed her gaze and smiled knowingly. Yeah, definitely not friendship. The music swelled around them, a soft jazz melody that seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as Harper's heartbeat. She watched Adrian excuse himself from his conversation, saw him moving toward her with purpose, and felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been locked away for so long she'd forgotten it was there. He reached her, just as the song changed to something slower, more intimate. "Dance with me," he said, extending his hand. It wasn't really a question. Harper took his hand, letting him lead her to the small area near the windows, where a few other couples were swaying together. His arms came around her waist, pulling her closer than was strictly appropriate for friends, and she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that made her want to bury her face in his neck. "This is new," she murmured as they began to move together. "What? Dancing? We've never danced." Adrian's hand tightened on her waist. "We've never done a lot of things." The words sent a shiver through her. They were talking about dancing, but they both knew they weren't really talking about dancing. Around them, the party continued. Champagne flowed, deals were made, futures were decided. But Harper felt like they were in their own private bubble, moving together to music that seemed written just for them. "Harper," Adrian said quietly, his voice rough around the edges. She looked up at him, and the expression in his eyes made her heart stop. There was want there, yes, but also something deeper. Years of carefully controlled emotion finally breaking free. "What are we doing?" she whispered. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I can't pretend anymore that I don't." "Mr. Collins?" A young assistant appeared at his elbow, tablet in hand. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but the reporter from TechCrunch is ready for your interview." The spell broke. Adrian stepped back, his businessman mask sliding back into place, but not before Harper saw frustration flash across his features. "Give me 5 minutes," he told the assistant, who nodded and disappeared back into the crowd. He turned back to Harper, running a hand through his hair. "I have to go," she said, forcing a smile. "This is your night." "Come home with me," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "After this is over, we need to talk." Harper's breath caught. Home. Not come over or let's get coffee. Home. Like she belonged there. Like she'd always belonged there. "Okay," she whispered. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear as he spoke. "Don't leave without me." Then he was gone, pulled back into his world of interviews and investors, leaving Harper standing by the windows with her heart pounding and her skin still tingling from his touch. She watched him work the room, confident, charming, every inch the successful entrepreneur. But every few minutes his eyes would find her again, and she'd see the real Adrian underneath the polished exterior, the boy who'd shared his lunch with her when she forgot hers. The teenager who'd held her while she cried over her first heartbreak. The man who'd just looked at her like she was everything he'd ever wanted. Sage appeared beside her again, following her gaze. "You know what I think?" "What?" Harper asked, not taking her eyes off Adrian. "I think tonight is going to change everything." Harper took a shaky sip of champagne, watching as Adrian charmed a room full of people who wanted to be close to his success. But his eyes kept coming back to her, and every time they did, she felt that flutter in her chest grow stronger. Maybe Sage was right. Maybe this was the night when 18 years of friendship finally became something more. Maybe this was the night she stopped pretending that Adrian Collins was just her best friend and admitted what she'd known in her heart for years. She was already in love with him. She had been for so long that she couldn't remember a time when she wasn't. The only question now was whether he felt the same way. And judging by the way he was looking at her from across the room, like she was the most precious thing in his world, she was about to find out. The night was just beginning. The silence in Adrian's Tesla was deafening. Harper stared out the passenger window as they glided through Seattle's rain-slicked streets, neon lights from late-night cafes and bars, painting streaks of color across her face. The party was behind them now, 3 hours of watching Adrian command rooms full of powerful people, all while stealing glances that made her feel like the only woman in the world. But now, in the intimate space of his car, with the soft hum of electric motor and the gentle patter of rain against glass, reality was settling in. This was Adrian, her Adrian, the boy who'd taught her to skip stones at Green Lake, who'd held her hair back when she was sick with flu at 17, who'd driven across the state to pick her up when her car broke down during her disastrous attempt at dating in college. And she was sitting in his $100,000 car, wearing a dress that made him look at her like she was someone completely different. "You're quiet," Adrian said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, the expensive watch on his wrist catching light from passing street lamps. "Just thinking," Harper replied, finally turning to look at him. Even in profile, he was devastating. The strong line of his jaw, the way his hair fell slightly across his forehead despite the careful styling from earlier. About? She could have lied. Could have said something safe about the party, about how impressed she was with his success, about anything other than the truth. Instead, she found herself being honest in the way that only came with 18 years of friendship. "About how I don't know how to be around you anymore." Adrian's foot eased off the accelerator slightly, and she saw his knuckles whiten on the steering wheel. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Harper took a shaky breath, "I mean you looked at me tonight like I was someone new, and I don't know if I am or if you are, or if we both just stopped pretending." He pulled into the underground garage of his building, a gleaming tower in Belltown that housed some of the city's most expensive condos. The car came to a stop in his designated space, but neither of them moved to get out. "Maybe we did," he said quietly. The admission hung between them like a confession. Harper felt her heart hammering against her ribs as Adrian turned in his seat to face her fully. "Harper, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me get through it, before you say anything." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Tonight, when you walked into that party," he paused, running a hand through his hair. "I've seen you in dresses before. Hell, I was your date to your cousin's wedding 3 years ago. But tonight was different. Tonight I looked at you and I couldn't breathe." Harper's lips parted slightly, but she remained silent. "And I kept thinking about how stupid I've been, how blind, because you weren't different tonight. I was just finally seeing what was always there." His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "You're beautiful, Harper. You've always been beautiful, and I've been pretending not to notice for so long that I convinced myself it wasn't true." "Adrian, I'm not finished." He reached across the center console, his fingers finding hers. The touch was electric, sending warmth shooting up her arm. "I'm 34 years old, and I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. And I know that's complicated, because we're friends and friendship is supposed to be safe, but I love you," Harper interrupted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Adrian went completely still. "What?" "I love you," she repeated, louder this time, more certain. "Not the way I'm supposed to love my best friend. The way a woman loves a man she can't imagine living without. I've loved you for years, Adrian. Maybe since we were 17 and you drove me to prom when Danny Reeves cancelled last minute. And you danced with me to At Last and told me I was too good for him anyway." The memory hit them both at the same time. Two teenagers swaying together in a high school gymnasium, her head on his shoulder, his hands careful and respectful on her waist, both of them pretending that the flutter in their chests was just friendship. "Jesus," Adrian breathed. How did we get so good at lying to ourselves? Harper laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and tears. Years of practice. He was still holding her hand, his thumb now tracing gentle circles across her knuckles. So what now? Now we stop pretending, Harper said, surprised by her own boldness. Now we see what happens when we stop being afraid of losing what we have and start reaching for what we could have. Adrian studied her face in the dim garage lighting, searching for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Instead, he found the same steady certainty that had drawn him to her since they were 12 years old, the quality that made Harper Lewis the most genuine person he'd ever known. "Come upstairs," he said, his voice rough with emotion. They rode the elevator to the 22nd floor in charged silence, hyper-aware of every breath, every small movement. Harper could see their reflection in the polished doors, Adrian tall and elegant in his expensive suit, her smaller frame wrapped in crimson silk, both of them looking like they were standing on the edge of a cliff. His penthouse was exactly what she'd expected, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sound, minimalist furniture in blacks and greys, art that probably cost more than most people's cars. But there were touches of the old Adrian too, a vintage computer on a shelf, photos of them together over the years, a worn leather jacket thrown over a chair that she remembered him wearing in college. "Drink?" he offered, moving toward a bar cart that looked like it belonged in a magazine. "Something strong," Harper replied, setting her clutch on his granite counter and immediately feeling self-conscious about how out of place she looked in his perfectly curated space. Adrian poured 2 glasses of whiskey, the good stuff, she could tell by the way he handled the bottle, and handed one to her. Their fingers brushed again in the exchange, and this time neither of them pretended not to notice. "To," he began, then paused. "What do we toast to?" "To whatever comes next," Harper said, lifting her glass. They drank, the whiskey burning warm and smooth down Harper's throat, giving her courage she didn't know she needed. "I should probably tell you," Adrian said, setting his glass aside, "that I've thought about this before, about us, especially lately." "Lately?" He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne again, could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. "The night you broke up with that lawyer, what was his name?" "Trevor," Harper supplied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Trevor." Adrian's mouth twisted slightly. "When you called me crying, saying you'd realized you were settling, that you deserved someone who looked at you like you hung the moon, I wanted to drive over and tell you that I'd been looking at you like that for years." Harper's breath caught. "Why didn't you?" "Because I was terrified of losing you. Because you're the most important person in my life, and the thought of ruining what we have—" He shook his head. "But tonight, watching other people look at you, seeing that blonde at the party, trying to get my attention, while all I could think about was how your laugh was the only sound in the room that mattered." He reached up, his fingers ghosting along her jawline, and Harper felt her knees go weak. "I realized I was already losing you," he continued. "Every day I pretended this was just friendship. Every time I watched you date someone else. Every moment I convinced myself that what I felt wasn't real. I was losing you piece by piece." "You never lost me," Harper whispered, leaning into his touch. "You couldn't. You're part of me, Adrian, you always have been." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, desire, and something deeper that made her heart race. He cupped her face with both hands now, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice so quiet she almost didn't hear it. Instead of answering, Harper rose on her tiptoes, closing the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, questioning, 18 years of friendship trembling on the edge of something else entirely. But then Harper's hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer, and Adrian made a low sound in his throat that sent heat spiraling through her body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "We can't take this back," he said, his voice rough. "I don't want to take it back," Harper replied without hesitation. "Do you?" "No." The word came out fierce, certain. "God, no." They kissed again, deeper this time, with years of suppressed longing finally finding expression. Harper could taste whiskey on his lips, could feel the careful control he was exercising, even as his hands tangled in her hair. When they separated again, she was dizzy with want and emotion. "I should go," she said, not meaning it at all. "You should," Adrian agreed, making no move to let her go. They stood there, holding each other, both knowing that everything had changed, and neither wanting to be the first to step away. "This is going to be complicated," Harper said. "Probably," Adrian agreed. "Are you scared?" Harper considered the question seriously. Was she scared? Of ruining their friendship? Of the intensity of her feelings? Of the fact that Adrian's world was so different from hers? Terrified, she admitted, but more scared of walking away from this, from you, than of whatever comes next. Adrian smiled, the real smile, the one reserved just for her. Then stay. The invitation hung between them, loaded with possibility and promise. Harper looked into his eyes and saw her future there. Uncertain, yes, but real in a way that nothing else had ever been. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Outside, rain continued to fall against the windows, the city lights blurred and distant. Inside, two best friends who had finally stopped pretending held each other close and wondered why it had taken them so long to find their way home. Because that's what this felt like. Coming home to a place she'd always belonged but had never been brave enough to claim. Until tonight. Harper woke to the sound of rain against unfamiliar windows. For a moment she lay still, disoriented by the softness of Egyptian cotton sheets and the subtle scent of Adrian's cologne lingering in the air. Then memory flooded back. The party, the car ride, the kiss that had changed everything between them. She was in Adrian's guest room, wearing one of his MIT t-shirts that hung loose on her smaller frame. He'd been a gentleman, of course, walking her to the door of the perfectly appointed room with its own bathroom and view of Elliott Bay, but not before kissing her goodnight. Soft, lingering, with a tenderness that had made her knees weak. The apartment was quiet, except for the gentle hum of expensive appliances and the distant sound of Seattle waking up 22 floors below. Harper padded to the window, pulling back the gauze curtains to reveal a grey morning, the kind that made the city look like a watercolor painting. "You're up early." She turned to find Adrian in the doorway, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He was wearing dark jeans and a navy Henley that clung to his chest in ways that made her mouth go dry. His hair was tousled from sleep, making him look more like the boy she'd grown up with and less like the polished businessman from last night. "I couldn't sleep," Harper admitted, accepting the mug gratefully. The coffee was perfect, cream, no sugar, exactly how she'd been drinking it since college. Some things never changed. "Second thoughts?" Adrian asked quietly, studying her face with those perceptive green eyes. Harper considered lying, giving him the easy answer. Instead, she chose honesty. "A few, but not about you. Never about you." Relief flickered across his features. He moved to stand beside her at the window, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "What about?" He pressed gently. "About this." She gestured around them. At the penthouse, at the view that probably cost more per month than she made in a year. "About how different our lives are now. About whether I fit in your world." Adrian set his mug on the windowsill and turned to face her fully. "Harper, look at me." She did, seeing sincerity in every line of his face. "This isn't my world," he said firmly. "This apartment, the parties, the money, that's just stuff. You want to know what my world is?" Harper nodded. "Saturday morning pancakes at that diner in Fremont where the coffee is terrible, but you insist the atmosphere is perfect. Watching movies on your couch while you fall asleep during the action scenes. Listening to you read the funny parts of books out loud while you're working at the store." His voice grew softer. "You are my world, Harper. You always have been." Tears pricked at her eyes. "But last night, watching you at that party, you were so confident, so in control. You belong with those people." "I was playing a role," Adrian said, reaching up to cup her face. "The same way I've been playing the role of just friends for years, but this," he gestured between them, "this is real. This is who I am when I stop pretending." Before Harper could respond, his phone buzzed insistently from the kitchen counter. Adrian ignored it. It buzzed again. "You should probably get that," Harper said reluctantly. Adrian sighed, retrieving the phone. His expression darkened as he read the screen. "It's Sage. Apparently the TechCrunch article is live, and some investor wants to set up a meeting today." "On Sunday?" Harper raised an eyebrow. "Money doesn't take weekends off." Adrian's jaw tightened with frustration. "I'm sorry. I thought we'd have today to figure this out, but you're the CEO of a hot startup, and the world doesn't stop because you had a revelation about your love life." Harper smiled, though she felt disappointment settle in her chest. "I get it, Adrian. Really. Come with me," he said suddenly. "What?" "To the meeting. Come with me." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I know it's not exactly romantic, but I don't want to leave you. Not today." Harper considered it for a moment, sitting in some sterile conference room while Adrian talked about market penetration and user acquisition. It wasn't exactly her idea of how to spend their first morning as whatever they were now. Actually, she said slowly, I should probably go home, take a shower, change clothes, figure out how to wrap my head around all this. She saw the flash of disappointment in his eyes before he masked it with understanding. Of course, I'll drive you. Adrian. Harper set down her mug and stepped closer to him. This isn't me running away. This is me being smart about what we're doing here. What do you mean? I mean we've been best friends for 18 years, and last night we crossed a line we can't uncross. That's huge, and wonderful, and terrifying. She reached for his hands, threading their fingers together. But we need to be deliberate about this. We need to make sure we're doing it right. Adrian squeezed her hands. What does doing it right look like? Harper had been thinking about this since she'd woken up, staring at the ceiling of his guest room and trying to process the magnitude of what was happening between them. It looks like taking time to adjust, like talking through what this means, like maybe dating. Dating? Adrian's eyebrows rose. We've known each other for 18 years, but we've never dated, Harper pointed out. We've never had to navigate the romantic side of this. We've never had to figure out how to be a couple, instead of just friends who happen to be in love with each other. A smile tugged at the corner of Adrian's mouth. So you want me to ask you out? Maybe. Harper felt heat rise in her cheeks. Is that crazy? Completely, Adrian said, but his eyes were warm. And perfect. Very you. He stepped closer, backing her gently against the window. The cool glass pressed against her shoulders as he braced his hands on either side of her head, caging her in. Harper Lewis, he said formally, though his voice was rough with barely controlled desire. Would you like to go to dinner with me? When? She whispered, acutely aware of how close he was, how his body heat seemed to surround her. Tonight. Somewhere fancy where I can spoil you, and you can wear another dress that makes me forget how to think. That sounds... She swallowed hard as he leaned closer, his lips almost brushing hers. That sounds like a date. It is a date, Adrian murmured against her mouth. Our first official date. We've eaten together hundreds of times. Not as a couple. His thumb traced along her jawline. Not with me spending the entire meal thinking about taking you home afterward and kissing you until neither of us can remember why we waited so long to do this. Harper's breath caught. Adrian. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with want. I should go, Harper said, though her body was screaming at her to stay, to melt into his arms and forget about the complicated logistics of turning a friendship into something more. You should, Adrian agreed, making no move to step away. They stayed frozen like that for a long moment, the tension between them crackling like electricity. Finally, Harper ducked under his arm, putting some necessary distance between them. 8 o'clock, she asked, smoothing down the t-shirt she wore. I'll pick you up at 7:30, Adrian said. Wear something that won't give me a heart attack. Harper laughed, the sound bright and musical in the morning quiet. No promises. An hour later, she was back in her own apartment, a cozy one-bedroom in Capitol Hill that felt impossibly small after the expansive luxury of Adrian's place. But it was hers, filled with books and plants and mismatched furniture that told the story of her life. She showered, letting the hot water wash away the last traces of expensive party perfume, and tried to process what had happened. In the span of 12 hours, her entire world had shifted. Adrian Collins, her best friend, her constant, the boy who'd known her longer and better than anyone, was now the man who'd kissed her like she was everything he'd ever wanted. Her phone buzzed with a text. Adrian, thank you for last night, for this morning, for being brave enough to say what we were both thinking. Another message followed immediately. Adrian, I can't stop smiling. Sage thinks I've lost my mind. Harper grinned, typing back quickly. Harper, have you? Adrian, completely. And I've never been happier about anything in my life. She was still smiling when her phone rang. The caller ID made her stomach flip. Hey, Mom, Harper answered, trying to sound normal. Harper, I was just thinking about you. How are you, sweetheart? Diane Lewis had an uncanny ability to call at exactly the wrong moment, but Harper couldn't help but feel a rush of affection for her mother's warm voice. I'm good, Mom. Really good, actually. You sound different, happy. Did something happen? Harper almost laughed. If only her mother knew. Maybe, Harper said carefully. I'll tell you about it soon, okay? Oh, honey, is it a man? Please tell me it's finally a man worthy of you. Mom, because that lawyer was completely wrong for you, and don't even get me started on that artist phase you went through in college. It might be, Harper admitted, unable to keep the smile out of her voice. Well, bring him to dinner next Sunday. Your father's been wanting to fire up the grill, and you know how he gets with potential boyfriends. The thought of bringing Adrian home to meet her parents, as her boyfriend instead of her friend, sent a thrill through Harper's chest. "I'll ask him," she promised. After hanging up, Harper sat on her bed, looking around the room that had been her sanctuary for 3 years. Everything looked the same. Her books, her photos, her carefully curated collection of vintage jewelry. But everything felt different. She was different. For the first time in her adult life, Harper Lewis was in love with someone who loved her back. And not just anyone. The person who knew her better than she knew herself, who'd been part of every important moment of her life since they were children. It was terrifying and wonderful and absolutely right. Her phone buzzed again. Adrian, counting the hours until tonight. Harper typed back quickly, her heart racing with anticipation. Harper, me too. Outside her window, Seattle was coming alive. People heading to coffee shops and farmers markets, living their Sunday lives. But Harper felt like she was living in a completely different world now, one where anything was possible. Tonight, she would go on her first date with her best friend. Tonight, they would find out what happened when 18 years of foundation met brand new desire. Tonight, everything would change again, and she couldn't wait. She changed her outfit 3 times. Harper stood in front of her bedroom mirror at 7:15, wearing a midnight blue dress that hugged her curves without being obvious about it. The neckline was modest but elegant, the fabric flowing like water when she moved. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and she'd spent more time on makeup than she had in months. For Adrian, for their first date, the thought still felt surreal. In 18 years of friendship, she'd gotten ready for countless events with him. School dances, college parties, work functions, but never like this. Never with her hands shaking slightly as she applied lipstick, never with her heart racing at the thought of how he might look at her. Her phone buzzed at exactly 7:30. "Adrian, I'm here. Take your time. I'll wait as long as you need." Harper smiled, grabbing her clutch and taking one last look in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was familiar but different, glowing with anticipation. Beautiful in a way that came from being deeply, completely wanted. She opened her apartment door to find Adrian leaning against the wall across from her entrance, and her breath caught. He was devastating in a charcoal grey suit that had definitely been tailored, a white shirt open at the collar, no tie. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and when he looked up from his phone and saw her, his expression shifted into something that made her knees weak. "Jesus, Harper," he breathed, straightening slowly. "You're going to kill me." "Good thing you have excellent health insurance," she replied, surprised by her own boldness. Adrian laughed, the sound rich and warm in the narrow hallway. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something different from last night, darker and more intimate. "You look—" He paused, his eyes traveling from her face down the length of her body and back up again. There aren't words. Heat flooded Harper's cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." "I try." Adrian offered his arm with old-fashioned gallantry. "Shall we?" The restaurant he'd chosen was Canlis. Harper had heard of it, of course, but never dreamed she'd actually eat there. Perched high above Lake Union, it was the kind of place where tech moguls and visiting celebrities went when they wanted to impress. The kind of place that required reservations months in advance. "How did you get us a table?" Harper asked as they settled into a corner booth with a view of the lake. Candles flickered between them, casting dancing shadows across Adrian's face. "I called in a favor," Adrian said, then grinned. "Okay, fine. I may have mentioned that I'd consider hosting my next company event here if they could accommodate us tonight." "Adrian Collins, are you using your influence to impress a girl? Is it working?" Harper looked around at the elegant dining room, the impeccable service, the view that stretched across the water to the twinkling lights of Queen Anne Hill. Then she looked back at Adrian, really looked at him, at the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, at the nervous energy he was trying to hide behind his confident exterior, at the fact that he'd gone to extraordinary lengths just to make their first date perfect. "It's not the restaurant," she said softly. "It's that you cared enough to try." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, becoming more vulnerable. "I've been planning this date in my head for hours, wanting to get everything right." "Why, it's just me." "No," Adrian said firmly. "It's not just you. It's never been just you, Harper. You're the most important person in my life, and this—" He gestured between them. "This matters more than anything I've ever done." Before Harper could respond, their server appeared with menus and wine recommendations. Adrian ordered a bottle of something French and expensive sounding, consulting with Harper first. even though she freely admitted her knowledge of wine ended at red or white. When they were alone again, an almost nervous silence settled between them. After 18 years of easy conversation, they were suddenly awkward, hyper-aware of every gesture and glance. "This is weird," Harper said finally. "So weird," Adrian agreed, relief evident in his voice. "We've eaten together hundreds of times, and suddenly I don't know how to sit across a table from you. Should we talk about the weather?" Harper suggested with a straight face. "I hear it might rain tomorrow." "In Seattle? Shocking." Adrian's mouth twitched with suppressed laughter. "Or we could discuss current events. Did you know there's this tech entrepreneur who just launched a major startup? Is he handsome and charming?" "Devastatingly so. Also completely in love with his best friend, which is apparently making him lose his mind." Adrian reached across the table, his fingers finding hers. The touch grounded them both, reminding them that underneath the formal setting and nervous energy, they were still Adrian and Harper. "Better?" he asked. "Much." The wine arrived, and with it some of their natural ease returned. They talked about the launch party, about Sage's reaction to seeing them together. She said, and I quote, "about damn time," about the investor meeting that had consumed Adrian's afternoon. "I kept thinking about you," Adrian admitted as they shared an appetizer that probably cost more than Harper's weekly grocery budget. "During the meeting, I mean. The investor was talking about market expansion, and all I could think about was whether you were having second thoughts." "I wasn't," Harper said immediately. "Were you?" "Not for a second." Adrian's thumb traced across her knuckles. "But I was terrified you might be, that you'd realize I'm not worth risking our friendship for." Harper nearly choked on her wine. "Are you kidding me? Adrian, you're brilliant, successful, gorgeous." "Harper, kind, funny, loyal to a fault." "Harper, and you've been the best part of my life since we were kids. If anyone should be worried about not being worth the risk, it's me." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, studying their joined hands. When he looked up, his expression was serious. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" Harper nodded. "The night of my MIT graduation, when my parents were going on and on about how proud they were, how successful I was going to be, all I could think about was how none of it mattered because you weren't there." Harper's throat tightened. She'd wanted to attend his graduation desperately, but she'd been in the middle of finals at UW and couldn't afford the plane ticket to Boston. "I called you afterward," Adrian continued. "Do you remember? It was late, but you answered anyway. And you told me how proud you were, how you knew I was going to change the world. And for the first time that entire day, I felt like my accomplishments actually meant something." "Adrian, that's when I knew," he said quietly. "That's when I knew that everything I achieved, everything I built, it was all meaningless if I couldn't share it with you." Tears pricked at Harper's eyes. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because I was a coward. Because I convinced myself that what we had was enough. Because I was terrified of losing the most important person in my world by wanting more." Their entrees arrived, perfectly prepared dishes that probably would have been memorable under any other circumstances. But Harper barely tasted her food, too consumed by the conversation, by the way Adrian was looking at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. "What changed?" she asked. "What made you finally—" "You, in that red dress," Adrian said immediately. "Watching other men look at you and realizing I couldn't pretend anymore that you were just my friend. Seeing you laugh and shine and be absolutely radiant, and knowing that I wanted to be the man who got to take you home at the end of the night. Not as your friend, but as your—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Boyfriend?" Harper suggested softly. "Is that what I am? Do you want to be?" Adrian's smile was answer enough, more than I've ever wanted anything. They lingered over dessert, a chocolate souffle that they shared, feeding each other bites while discussing everything and nothing. The restaurant slowly emptied around them, but neither wanted the evening to end. Finally, reluctantly, they made their way back to Adrian's car. The drive to Harper's apartment was quiet, charged with unspoken possibility. When he pulled up in front of her building, neither moved to get out. "I had a perfect time tonight," Harper said, turning in her seat to face him, "even though I was basically a nervous wreck for the first half hour. Especially because of that. It was sweet, seeing you nervous about impressing me." Adrian reached over, cupping her face with one hand. "I want to impress you every day for the rest of our lives." The words hung between them, loaded with implication. Harper felt her heart race as Adrian leaned closer, his thumb brushing across her cheek. "Can I walk you to your door?" he asked, his voice rough. "What if you do? Then I'll probably kiss you goodnight, and then I'll probably have a very hard time leaving." "What if I don't want you to leave?" Adrian's eyes darkened. Harper, I'm not talking about... I'm not ready for... She took a shaky breath. But maybe you could stay for coffee. We could talk more. Just talk. Just talk, Harper confirmed, though the way she was looking at him suggested talking might not be the only thing on her mind. Okay, Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'd like that. They walked up to her apartment in comfortable silence, hyper-aware of every brush of their hands, every shared glance. Harper's fingers trembled slightly as she unlocked her door, acutely conscious of Adrian's presence behind her, of what it meant to invite him into her space as more than just her friend. Her apartment looked different somehow with Adrian in it as her boyfriend. Smaller, more intimate. He moved to her couch like he had dozens of times before, but when she joined him with 2 mugs of coffee, everything felt new. This is nice, Adrian said, looking around the familiar space. Being here with you like this. Harper curled up next to him, close enough to feel his warmth but not quite touching. It feels right, doesn't it? Like this is how it was always supposed to be. Yeah, Adrian agreed, setting down his mug and turning to face her fully. It really does. When he kissed her this time, it was different from the night before, less desperate, more sure, like he finally believed she wasn't going anywhere. Harper melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, and thought that she could do this forever. Kiss Adrian Collins in her living room while rain pattered against the windows and the rest of the world disappeared. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I should probably go, he said reluctantly. Probably, Harper agreed, making no move to let him go. Harper? I think I'm falling in love with you. Harper's breath caught. I think I fell in love with you a long time ago. They kissed again, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Harper knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, the way they always had, the way they always would. 3 weeks into dating her best friend, Harper learned that love was messier than the movies suggested. Not the love itself. That part was easy, natural as breathing. It was everything else that came with transitioning from 18 years of friendship into something deeper, more complex. It was the way Adrian's assistant now scheduled personal time in his calendar when he wanted to see her. It was how Harper caught herself overthinking every text message, wondering if she sounded too needy or not affectionate enough. It was moments like this one, sitting in Adrian's office at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, watching him pace behind his desk while barking instructions into his phone about some crisis with their biggest client. Harper curled deeper into the leather chair across from his desk, nursing a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. She'd come straight from her shift at the bookstore, still wearing jeans and a simple sweater, feeling increasingly out of place in the gleaming corporate environment. No, that's not acceptable, Adrian was saying, his voice sharp with controlled frustration. I don't care if it's midnight in Tokyo. Get them on the line. We're not losing this contract because of a communication breakdown. Harper watched him move, all controlled energy and laser focus, and felt that familiar flutter of attraction mixed with something newer, concern. This was the 3rd emergency this week, the 3rd time their plans had been derailed by his company's relentless demands. Adrian ended the call and immediately reached for another file, his jaw tight with tension. Adrian, Harper said softly. He looked up, seeming to remember she was there. God, I'm sorry. This should only take another few minutes and then another call will come in, Harper interrupted gently. Or another emergency. Or another investor who can only meet at 10 p.m. Adrian's hands stilled on the papers. What are you saying? Harper stood, moving to the window that looked out over the city. Seattle sparkled below them, all lights and possibility, but she felt suddenly small and uncertain. I'm saying I don't know how to fit into this, she admitted. Your world. I don't know the rules. She heard him set down the file, heard his footsteps crossing the room. When his hands settled on her shoulders, she leaned back into his warmth, despite her frustration. There are no rules, Adrian said quietly. Just us figuring it out as we go. Are we, though? Harper turned in his arms, looking up into his tired face. Figuring it out? Because it feels like your company gets the best parts of you, and I get whatever's left over. The words hung between them sharper than she'd intended. Adrian's expression shifted, becoming defensive. That's not fair, he said. You knew what my life was like when we started this. You knew how demanding the company is. I knew Adrian Collins was successful, Harper replied. I didn't know that dating him meant competing with board meetings and investor calls for his attention. You're not competing with, then prove it. The challenge slipped out before Harper could stop it, fueled by 3 weeks of swallowed frustration and growing insecurity. Adrian stepped back, his expression cooling. "What do you want me to do, Harper? Walk away from everything I've built? I want you to remember that relationships take work too," Harper said, her voice rising slightly. "I want you to acknowledge that constantly cancelling our plans for urgent business makes me feel like an afterthought." "You are not an afterthought," Adrian said firmly. "You're the most important thing in my life. Then act like it." The words echoed in the sudden silence of the office. They stared at each other across the space, both breathing hard, both realizing they'd stumbled into their first real fight. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, leaving it disheveled. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted quietly. "Balance everything. Be the CEO everyone expects and the boyfriend you deserve." Something in Harper softened at the vulnerability in his voice. This was the Adrian she'd fallen in love with, not the polished executive, but the man who was brave enough to show her his fears. "I don't need you to be perfect," she said, moving closer. "I need you to be present. I need to feel like when we're together, you're actually here with me, not thinking about the next crisis you have to solve." Adrian cupped her face with both hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "You're right. God, you're absolutely right. I've been so focused on not screwing up the company that I've been screwing up with you. We're both figuring this out," Harper said softly, "but we have to figure it out together, not with you trying to handle everything alone." "I love you," Adrian said suddenly, the words tumbling out like a confession. "I'm completely, terrifyingly in love with you, and the thought of losing you because I can't get my priorities straight is—" Harper silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her own love and frustration and hope into the contact. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "That's why this matters. That's why we have to get it right." Adrian rested his forehead against hers, his hands still framing her face. "Help me get it right. Tell me what you need." Harper considered the question seriously. What did she need? Not grand gestures or expensive gifts. She'd never cared about those things. "I need you to turn your phone off sometimes," she said finally. "I need date nights that don't get interrupted by work calls. I need to feel like Harper Lewis, not just an item on Adrian Collins' schedule." "Done," Adrian said immediately. "What else?" "I need you to let me in," Harper continued. "When you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, when you're scared about the company, talk to me. Don't just shut down and work harder." Adrian nodded, something shifting in his expression. "I can do that. I want to do that. And I need—" Harper paused, feeling vulnerable. "I need you to help me figure out how I fit in your world, because I want to be part of it, Adrian. I want to support you and celebrate your successes and be your partner in all of this. But right now I feel like I'm watching your life from the outside." "You're not on the outside," Adrian said fiercely. "You're the center of everything. I got scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of dragging you into the chaos. Scared of you realizing how insane my life is and deciding it's not worth it. Scared of—" He took a shaky breath. "Scared of you leaving." Harper's heart clenched. "Adrian, look at me." He did, his green eyes vulnerable in the office lighting. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "But if you keep trying to protect me from your real life, you're going to push me away without meaning to." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. Then he reached for his phone, powering it off completely. "What are you doing?" Harper asked. "Choosing you," Adrian said simply. "The Tokyo call can wait until morning. The files can wait. Right now I want to take my girlfriend home and order terrible Chinese food and watch bad movies until we fall asleep on the couch." Harper felt tears prick her eyes. "What about the emergency?" "There will always be another emergency," Adrian said, shrugging into his jacket. "But there's only one you." As they left the office together, Harper slipped her hand into Adrian's, feeling the rightness of the gesture. They walked to the elevator in comfortable silence, both lost in thought. "Harper," Adrian said as they waited for the elevator. "Yeah? Thank you for fighting with me." Harper raised an eyebrow. "Thank you for fighting with me, for caring enough to call me out when I was being an idiot, for not just walking away when things got complicated." The elevator arrived and they stepped inside. "I've never had someone do that before. Love me enough to demand better from me." "Well, get used to it," Harper said with a small smile. "Because I plan on being demanding for a very long time." Adrian pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Promise. Promise." 20 minutes later, they were curled up on Harper's couch with containers of questionable pad thai and a romantic comedy that neither was really watching. Adrian's phone sat silent on the coffee table, and for the first time in weeks, he seemed completely present. "This is better," Harper murmured, her head on his shoulder as the credits rolled. "Much better," Adrian agreed, his fingers combing through her hair. "I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out." "We figured it out," Harper corrected. "Together." Adrian tilted her chin up, meeting her eyes in the blue glow from the television. "I meant what I said earlier. I love you, Harper Lewis, not just as my friend, not just as someone who's always been in my life. I love you as the woman I want to build a future with." Harper's breath caught. A future. The word hung between them, heavy with possibility. "What does that look like?" she asked quietly. "Our future?" Adrian smiled, the expression soft and sure. "I don't know all the details, but I know it looks like this. Like choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. Like fighting and making up and figuring out how to be partners in everything." "That sounds messy," Harper observed. "The best things usually are." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Harper settled back against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Outside, Seattle hummed with late-night energy, people rushing to meetings, couples on dates, the city that never truly slept. But inside Harper's small apartment, wrapped in Adrian's arms with his phone silent and his attention completely hers, the world felt perfectly still. They'd had their first fight. They'd navigated their first real challenge. And they'd come through it stronger, more honest, more committed to making this work. It wasn't the fairy tale version of love Harper had imagined as a girl. It was better, messier and more real, but infinitely more precious because they were building it together. One difficult conversation and small choice at a time. "Adrian?" Harper murmured against his chest. "Next time you have a work emergency, can you at least let me bring you dinner? I want to be part of your world, even the stressful parts." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "Next time I have a work emergency, you'll be the first person I call. Promise?" "Promise." And as they drifted off together on her couch, still dressed and tangled together, Harper knew they were going to be okay. More than okay. They were going to be extraordinary. Harper woke up in Adrian's arms for the first time on a Saturday morning that felt like pure magic. Soft light filtered through the gauze curtains of his bedroom, casting everything in golden hues. Adrian slept peacefully beside her, his dark hair falling across his forehead, his face relaxed in a way she rarely saw when he was awake. They were both still clothed. Last night had been about falling asleep together after hours of talking, not about crossing physical lines they weren't ready for. But waking up beside him felt intimate in a way that made Harper's chest tight with emotion. This was what forever could look like. Lazy Saturday mornings, tangled sheets, the quiet peace of being completely at home with another person. Adrian stirred, as if sensing her gaze, his eyes fluttering open to meet hers. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," Harper whispered back, suddenly shy despite the fact that this was Adrian, her Adrian. "Sleep okay?" He reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, the gesture tender and unconscious. "Better than I have in weeks," Harper admitted. "You?" "Best sleep of my life," Adrian said, and from the way he was looking at her, like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, Harper believed him. They lay there for a long moment, just looking at each other, both marveling at how right this felt. Then Adrian's stomach rumbled audibly, breaking the spell. Harper laughed. "Someone's hungry. Someone didn't eat dinner last night because he was too busy making out with his girlfriend," Adrian replied, grinning. Heat flooded Harper's cheeks at the casual way he said, "girlfriend," like it was the most natural thing in the world, which she supposed it was becoming. "Pancakes," she suggested. "I could make my famous Saturday morning special." Adrian's eyebrows rose. "You cook now?" "I've always cooked," Harper protested. "You just never paid attention because we usually ordered pizza when you came over." "Show me," Adrian said, sitting up and pulling her with him. "I want to see all the sides of Harper Lewis I've been missing." An hour later, Harper stood in Adrian's pristine kitchen, trying not to feel intimidated by appliances that probably cost more than her car. Adrian sat at the breakfast bar, watching her move around the space, with an expression that was part fascination, part desire. "You realize I've been imagining this for months," he said as she flipped pancakes with practiced ease. "Imagining what?" "Breakfast. Imagining you in my kitchen, making yourself at home, looking perfectly right in my space." Adrian's voice was rough around the edges. "Imagining what it would be like to wake up with you every morning." Harper's hand stilled on the spatula. "Adrian, I know it's too soon to be thinking like that, he said quickly. I know we're still figuring things out, but Harper, I can't help it. When I look at you, I see my future. Before Harper could respond, Adrian's phone buzzed insistently against the granite counter. They both looked at it, and Harper saw the name that made her stomach clench. Rebecca Thornfield, venture capitalist. You should answer it, Harper said quietly, though something in her chest tightened. Adrian glanced at the phone, then back at Harper. It can wait. It's Saturday morning, Adrian. If she's calling now, it must be important. After a moment's hesitation, Adrian answered. Rebecca, good morning. Harper turned back to the pancakes, trying not to listen to the conversation, but Adrian's voice carried in the open space. Monday? That's very short notice. I understand the opportunity, but yes, I realize what this could mean for the company. Harper flipped the last pancake with more force than necessary. I'll need to check my schedule and get back to you, Adrian said finally. Thanks for thinking of us. He hung up and was quiet for a long moment. What was that about? Harper asked, not turning around. Potential acquisition, Adrian said carefully. A bigger tech company wants to meet about possibly buying Nexus. Harper's heart skipped. That's huge. Yeah, it is. She turned to face him, pancakes forgotten. You don't sound excited. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly tired despite the early hour. It's complicated. The offer would be life-changing. Enough money to never have to work again if I didn't want to. But it would also mean giving up control of everything I've built. What do you want to do? I don't know, Adrian admitted. 6 months ago, the answer would have been easy. Growth, expansion, more success. But now? Adrian looked at her, his expression soft and vulnerable. And now I have something more important than the company to consider. Harper felt her breath catch. Adrian, you can't make a decision like this based on the woman I love? Adrian stood, moving around the counter to face her. Based on wanting a life that's about more than board meetings and profit margins? What if you regret it? Harper asked quietly. What if you give up this opportunity and then resent me for it later? Harper, look at me. Adrian cupped her face in his hands. I could never resent you for showing me what really matters. Before you, before us, all I cared about was building something bigger, better, more impressive. But you've made me want something else. What? A life, Adrian said simply. A real life, with someone I love, doing work that means something beyond just making money. Harper felt tears prick her eyes. But your company is your dream. My company was my dream when I thought work was all I'd ever have, Adrian corrected. You've given me new dreams, Harper. Dreams about us. Before Harper could respond, Adrian's phone rang again. This time the display showed Sage's name. I should, Adrian began. Take it, Harper said. I'll finish breakfast. Adrian answered reluctantly. Sage, it's Saturday. Harper couldn't hear Sage's response, but she could see Adrian's expression growing more serious. When? Adrian asked. How bad? Okay. I'll be there in an hour. He hung up, looking stricken. What happened? Harper asked. Security breach, Adrian said, already moving toward the bedroom. Someone hacked our client database. We could lose everything. Harper watched him disappear into the bedroom, heard drawers opening and closing as he got dressed. When he emerged 5 minutes later in jeans and a button-down, he looked every inch the CEO in crisis mode. I'm so sorry, he said, stopping in front of her. I know we were supposed to have today together, but go, Harper said firmly. Your company needs you. Come with me, Adrian said suddenly. I know it's not exactly romantic, but Adrian, I'd be in the way. You need to focus on fixing this. He looked like he wanted to argue, but another call came through, this time from his head of security. Adrian answered immediately, and Harper could hear the urgency in the other person's voice. I have to go, Adrian said after hanging up. But Harper, tonight you'll be dealing with this crisis, Harper said gently. And that's okay. We'll have other Saturdays. Adrian kissed her quickly, desperately. I love you. I love you too. Go save your company. After Adrian left, Harper stood alone in his pristine kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of their perfect morning. The pancakes sat cooling on the stove, syrup still warming in the microwave, coffee growing cold in the pot. She cleaned up methodically, trying not to think about how quickly their bubble of intimacy had burst. This was Adrian's world. Constant crisis, impossible demands, a level of pressure she couldn't fully understand. Her phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. Is this Harper Lewis? Harper frowned, typing back quickly. Harper, who is this? Unknown. Rebecca Thornfield. Adrian gave me your number. I was hoping we could meet for coffee this afternoon. There are some things about the acquisition offer I think you should know. Harper stared at the message, confusion and unease warring in her chest. Why would Adrian's potential business partner want to meet with her? And why did something about this feel wrong? She was still debating how to respond when another text came through, this one from Adrian. Adrian, crisis worse than we thought. Might be here all weekend. I'm so sorry, baby. Rain check on pancakes? Harper looked around Adrian's empty apartment, at the breakfast they'd never eaten, at the perfect morning that had disintegrated in the space of 2 phone calls. Then she looked back at Rebecca Thornfield's message and made a decision that would change everything. Harper, yes. Where and when? The response came immediately. Rebecca, Pike Place Market, 2 p.m. I'll be at the coffee stand near the fish market. Harper spent the rest of the morning trying to talk herself out of going. Whatever Rebecca Thornfield wanted to discuss, it probably wasn't Harper's business. Adrian's work was his domain, and she'd just fought with him about wanting to be included more in his life. But something nagged at her, the way Rebecca had reached out directly, the timing of the call during their intimate morning, the way Adrian had seemed conflicted about the acquisition offer. At 1:45, Harper found herself walking through Pike Place Market, scanning the crowded coffee stands for a woman she'd never met, but somehow felt she needed to see. Rebecca Thornfield was easy to spot. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed, even for a casual Saturday afternoon. She looked like someone who belonged in Adrian's world in ways that Harper sometimes worried she never would. Harper, Rebecca approached with a confident smile. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not sure why I did, Harper replied honestly. What did you want to discuss? Rebecca gestured toward a quieter corner of the market, away from the weekend crowds. I wanted to talk to you about Adrian, about the offer my company is making. I'm not involved in Adrian's business decisions. Aren't you? Rebecca's smile sharpened slightly. Because from what I understand, you're a major factor in why he's hesitating to accept our offer. Harper felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? Adrian Collins was one of the most ambitious entrepreneurs I'd ever met, Rebecca said. Focused, driven, willing to do whatever it took to succeed. But lately he's been different, distracted, and I think we both know why. If you have something to say, just say it, Harper said, her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. Rebecca studied her for a moment, then leaned closer. I'm offering Adrian $50 million for his company. $50 million. Do you have any idea what that kind of money could do for his future? For both your futures? Harper's breath caught. $50 million. She'd known Adrian was successful, but the number was staggering. But he's going to turn it down, Rebecca continued, because he's convinced that selling means giving up control, giving up his dream, and I think someone he trusts needs to help him see that sometimes the smart move is to take the money and run. Why are you telling me this? Harper asked. Because I think you love him enough to want what's best for him, Rebecca said simply. Even if what's best for him isn't what feels comfortable for you. The words hit Harper like a physical blow, because underneath Rebecca's polished delivery was an implication that made Harper's worst fears crystallize, that she was holding Adrian back, that her presence in his life was making him less ambitious, less successful. I would never ask Adrian to choose between me and his career, Harper said quietly. You don't have to ask, Rebecca replied. He's already choosing. The question is whether you're going to let him make a decision he might regret for the rest of his life. Harper stared at the woman across from her, seeing everything she'd always worried she wasn't. Sophisticated, polished, completely at home in Adrian's high-stakes world. Think about it, Rebecca said, standing to leave. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step aside and let someone reach their full potential. Then she was gone, leaving Harper alone in the crowded market with 50 million reasons to question everything she thought she knew about love, ambition, and what was best for the man she'd fallen for. As Harper walked slowly back to her car, Rebecca's words echoed in her head. Was she holding Adrian back? Had her presence in his life made him less willing to take risks, to reach for the success he'd always wanted? By the time she reached her apartment, Harper had made a decision that terrified her. She was going to find out. Harper hadn't slept in 36 hours. She sat curled in her reading chair by the window, watching Seattle's Sunday morning unfold below, while Adrian's words from their last real conversation echoed in her mind. When I look at you, I see my future. But what if she was the wrong future for him? Rebecca Thornfield's words had burrowed deep, poisoning every memory with doubt. $50 million. The phrase rolled around Harper's head like a marble in a jar, impossible to ignore. That was generational wealth, life-changing money, the kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime. And Adrian was hesitating because of her. Her phone buzzed for the 20th time since yesterday. Another text from Adrian. Adrian, finally got some sleep at the office. Crisis contained for now. Can I see you tonight? I missed you so much yesterday. Harper stared at the message until the words blurred. 3 days ago, that text would have filled her with warmth and anticipation. Now it felt like evidence of everything Rebecca had accused her of. She was a distraction, pulling Adrian away from what really mattered. She typed and deleted half a dozen responses before settling on, Harper, still feeling off. Maybe we should talk tomorrow. The response came immediately. Adrian, are you sick? I can bring soup and take care of you. Harper, just need some space to think. A longer pause this time then. Adrian, think about what? Harper, if something's wrong, please just tell me. Harper set the phone aside without responding. How could she explain that she was questioning everything about their relationship, that she was starting to wonder if loving him meant letting him go? An hour later, her doorbell rang. Harper knew it was Adrian before she opened it, knew from the particular way he knocked, urgent but patient. When she pulled the door open, he looked exhausted, wearing the same clothes from yesterday with his hair disheveled and worry etched in every line of his face. You look terrible, Harper said before she could stop herself. Thanks, Adrian replied dryly. Can I come in? She stepped aside reluctantly, watching as he moved into her living room with the familiarity of someone who belonged there. Except now Harper found herself cataloguing all the ways he didn't fit, how his expensive watch looked out of place against her second-hand furniture, how his presence seemed to shrink the modest space. Harper, what's going on? Adrian turned to face her, his green eyes searching her face. Yesterday morning everything was perfect, and now you won't even look at me. I've been thinking, Harper said carefully, wrapping her arms around herself. About us. About whether we're making a mistake. Adrian went very still. What kind of mistake? The kind where we confuse nostalgia for love, Harper said, hating herself for each word, but unable to stop. The kind where we risk ruining the best friendship either of us has ever had for something that might not even work. Harper, that's not... Isn't it? She interrupted, moving to put space between them. Adrian, be honest. Has dating me made your life better or more complicated? Adrian stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. Harper, you are the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm a distraction, Harper said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Yesterday you had a major crisis at work, and instead of being there focused and ready, you were making pancakes with me. Instead of jumping at a $50 million opportunity, you're hesitating because... Wait. Adrian's voice cut through her spiral like a blade. How do you know about the acquisition offer? Harper's blood turned to ice. She hadn't meant to reveal that, hadn't even realized she'd said it. Someone mentioned it. Who? Adrian's expression was shifting from confusion to something harder. Harper, who told you about Rebecca's offer? The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Harper could lie, could make up some story about overhearing a conversation, but Adrian knew her too well. He'd see through it immediately. Rebecca Thornfield called me, Harper admitted quietly. She wanted to meet. Adrian's face went completely blank. You met with her? It wasn't a question. She said, I don't care what she said, Adrian interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. You met with a potential business partner behind my back. You let a stranger poison your head against our relationship without even talking to me first. Harper felt tears threaten. Adrian, she made valid points. She manipulated you, Adrian said, his composure finally cracking. Jesus Christ, Harper. Rebecca Thornfield is a shark. She's probably been looking for leverage since the day I told her I was considering turning down the offer, and you just handed it to her. What do you mean, leverage? Adrian laughed, but the sound held no humor. You think she called you out of concern for my future? Harper, she needs me to sell. Her firm has investors breathing down their necks, and if this deal falls through, she's in trouble. So she found my weakness, you, and went after it. The words hit Harper like physical blows. Your weakness? That's not what I meant. No, that's exactly what you meant. Harper's voice was rising now, months of insecurity finally erupting. I'm your weakness. I'm the thing holding you back from the success you really want. You're the thing that makes success mean something. Adrian shot back. Harper, without you, none of this matters. The money, the company, the recognition. It's all just noise without someone to share it with. But what if it doesn't have to be? Harper asked, tears finally spilling over. What if you could have both? The success and someone who actually fits in your world. Adrian stared at her, and Harper saw the moment he realized what she was really saying. You want to break up, he said flatly. I want what's best for you. What's best for me? Adrian's voice was incredulous. Harper, you are what's best for me. How do you not see that? Because I'm not. The words exploded out of her, all her fears and insecurities finally given voice. I'm a bookstore manager from Capitol Hill who doesn't know the difference between venture capital and private equity. I shop at Target and think $30 wine is expensive. Your business partner takes one look at me and immediately knows I'm not good enough for you. Harper, she was right, Adrian. I saw it in her face the second we met. I don't belong in boardrooms and investor meetings. I don't understand your world, and trying to fit into it is only going to hurt both of us. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with an intensity that made Harper want to hide. Is that really what you think? He asked finally. That this is about money and status and fitting in? Isn't it? No, Adrian said firmly. It's about you being scared, and instead of talking to me about it, you let a stranger convince you that our love isn't real. Harper wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Maybe it's not. Maybe we just wanted it to be real because the friendship was so good. Look at me, Adrian commanded, stepping closer. When Harper reluctantly met his gaze, his eyes were blazing with emotion. I am going to say this once, and I need you to really hear me. I love you. Not because you're convenient, not because you're familiar, not because I'm confused about what I feel. I love you because you're brilliant and kind and real in a way that no one else in my life is. Adrian, I'm not finished. His voice was rough with suppressed emotion. Yes, my world is complicated. Yes, there are people in it who will judge you for not having the right background or education or whatever arbitrary bullshit they think matters. But Harper, you make me better. You make me want to be better. And if you think I'm going to let Rebecca Thornfield's manipulation convince you otherwise, you don't know me as well as I thought you did. Harper felt something crack open in her chest. But the money is just money, Adrian said. Do you know what I was thinking about during the crisis yesterday? While I was dealing with hackers and angry clients and board members who wanted to panic? Harper shook her head. I was thinking about how much I wanted to come home to you, how the only thing that mattered was getting through it, so I could go back to your apartment and fall asleep with you in my arms. Adrian's voice broke slightly. That's when I knew, Harper. Not the money, not the success, not any of it means anything without you. The tears came harder now, a mixture of relief and shame and overwhelming love. I'm sorry, Harper whispered. I'm so sorry. I let her get in my head and Hey! Adrian moved closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. I get it. I do. This is all new and scary, and there are people who are going to try to make you feel like you don't belong. But Harper, you belong with me. You've always belonged with me. What about Rebecca's offer? Adrian was quiet for a moment, his thumbs brushing away her tears. I turned it down this morning. Harper's eyes widened. Adrian? No, you can't. I already did. His smile was soft and sure. Sage thought I was insane, and my board is probably going to revolt, but I don't care. I'd rather build something smaller that's actually mine than sell my soul for someone else's idea of success. But $50 million is a lot of money, Adrian agreed. But it's not worth giving up control of my company or my future, and it's definitely not worth losing you over. Harper stared at him, seeing the certainty in his eyes, the peace in his expression. This wasn't a man who'd made a decision he regretted. This was someone who'd finally figured out what really mattered. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Adrian replied, leaning down to rest his forehead against hers. But Harper, we need to make a promise to each other. No more letting other people get between us. No more making decisions about our relationship without talking to each other first. Harper nodded, feeling like she could breathe fully for the first time in days. Promise. And one more thing, Adrian said, his mouth quirking into a smile. Next time someone tries to convince you you're not good enough for me, you tell them they have it backwards. I'm the one trying to be worthy of you. Harper laughed through her tears, pulling him closer. That's ridiculous. That's love, Adrian corrected, kissing her softly. Messy, irrational, completely worth fighting for love. They held each other in Harper's small living room, both of them shaky with relief and the knowledge that they'd almost lost everything. Outside, Seattle hummed with Sunday afternoon energy, but inside Harper's apartment, Two people who'd nearly let fear destroy the best thing in their lives were learning how to trust in love again. "So what happens now?" Harper asked against Adrian's chest. "Now we order terrible Chinese food and watch bad movies and remember why we fell in love in the first place," Adrian said. "And tomorrow we figure out how to build a life together that works for both of us." "Together," Harper repeated, liking the sound of the word. "Together," Adrian confirmed. "Always together." 2 weeks after almost losing everything, Harper found herself with a key to Adrian's penthouse. Not because he'd made some grand romantic gesture or formal declaration. It had happened naturally, practically, the way most real moments in their relationship did. She'd been staying over more nights than not, and one morning, Adrian had simply pressed the sleek black card into her palm while they shared coffee and the newspaper. "So you don't have to wait for me to let you in," he'd said, as if giving someone access to a multi-million-dollar penthouse was the most ordinary thing in the world. Now Harper stood in Adrian's kitchen at 6:30 on a Wednesday evening, stirring risotto and feeling more at home than she ever had in her own apartment. The incongruity wasn't lost on her. 3 months ago, she couldn't have imagined herself cooking in a kitchen that belonged in a magazine, wearing one of Adrian's MIT sweatshirts over her work clothes, completely comfortable in a space that had once intimidated her. The elevator chimed, and Harper smiled without looking up. She'd memorized the sound of Adrian's arrival, the soft ping, his keys hitting the entry table. The way he always called out her name like coming home to her was the best part of his day. "Harper?" His voice carried that note of pleased surprise he got whenever he found her there, even though she'd been staying over most nights for 2 weeks. "Kitchen," she called back, adding another ladle of warm stock to the rice. She heard his footsteps crossing the hardwood, felt his presence behind her before his arms came around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He buried his face in her neck, breathing her in like she was something precious. "Best part of my day," he murmured against her skin, confirming what Harper already knew. "How was the board meeting?" Harper asked, leaning into his warmth. "Brutal," Adrian admitted, his arms tightening around her. 3 hours of explaining why I turned down Rebecca's offer, plus some colorful commentary about my decision-making skills." Harper tensed slightly. They'd agreed not to let outside opinions affect their relationship, but she still felt a stab of guilt every time Adrian faced consequences for choosing her over the acquisition. "Hey," Adrian spun her around to face him, reading her expression immediately. "None of that. We talked about this." "I know, but nothing." Adrian cupped her face in his hands, his green eyes serious. "Harper, the board can complain all they want, but in 6 months, when we've doubled our user base and landed 3 new major clients, they'll understand why I made the right choice." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure about you," Adrian said simply. "Everything else is just details." He kissed her then, soft and sure, tasting like the confidence Harper sometimes struggled to feel. When they broke apart, she saw something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. "What?" she asked. "Nothing, just—" Adrian smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I love finding you here when I come home. I love that you know where everything is in my kitchen. I love that you're wearing my sweatshirt and making dinner and acting like you belong here." "Do I?" Harper asked quietly. "Belong here? More than I do," Adrian said without hesitation. "This place was just expensive square footage until you started leaving your books on my coffee table and your coffee mug in my sink." Harper felt that familiar flutter in her chest, the one that came whenever Adrian said something that made her imagine forever. "The risotto's almost ready." "Good, I'm starving." Adrian moved to the wine fridge, pulling out a bottle of something that probably cost more than Harper's monthly rent. "Sage sends her regards, by the way, and an invitation to her birthday party this weekend. She wants me there. She specifically requested that I, quote, bring Harper or don't bother coming." Adrian's mouth quirked into a smile. "I think you've been officially adopted by my inner circle." As they settled at Adrian's dining table, which Harper had convinced him to actually use instead of eating standing at the kitchen counter, she found herself marveling at how natural this felt. The easy conversation, the shared silences, the way Adrian automatically served her wine and she automatically stole bites from his plate. "I have something to tell you," Adrian said as they finished dinner, his tone shifting to something more serious. Harper's stomach clenched. "What?" "Nothing bad," Adrian said quickly, reading her expression. "Actually something good, I hope." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I've been thinking about what I want to do with the company now that I'm staying independent. about what kind of business I want to build, what kind of legacy I want to leave. Harper squeezed his fingers encouragingly. I want to pivot, Adrian continued. Instead of just building software for other companies, I want to create technology that actually helps people. Educational platforms, accessibility tools, things that make a real difference. Adrian, that sounds amazing. It would mean slower growth, probably less money in the short term, Adrian said. Some investors won't like it. The board definitely won't love it. But, Adrian's smile was soft and sure. But it's work I'd be proud to tell my kids about someday. Harper's breath caught. Kids. The word hung between them, loaded with implication and possibility. Kids? She repeated quietly. I mean, Adrian's confidence faltered slightly. Someday, if that's something you... I know we haven't talked about... I want kids, Harper said quickly. Someday with the right person. And am I... Adrian's voice was vulnerable now. Could I be the right person? Harper looked across the table at the man who'd been her best friend for 18 years, who'd chosen her over $50 million, who was talking about changing his entire business model to do work that mattered. She saw their future spreading out before them, messy and complicated, and absolutely perfect. Yeah, she whispered. You could be. Adrian's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. Yeah. He stood abruptly, moving around the table to pull her into his arms. When he kissed her this time, it was different, deeper, more certain, filled with promise and possibility, and the kind of love that rewrote your entire understanding of what home meant. I love you, he murmured against her lips. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Good scared or bad scared? Good scared, Adrian said immediately. The kind of scared that means something matters more than you ever thought possible. They cleaned up dinner together, moving around each other in the kitchen with the easy coordination of a couple who'd found their rhythm. Harper washed while Adrian dried, and she found herself studying his profile in the soft lighting. What? Adrian asked, catching her stare. Just thinking about how different you look here than you do at work. Different how? Younger, happier, more like the Adrian I grew up with. Adrian set down the dish towel, turning to face her fully. That's because this version of me only exists with you. Work Adrian is just a performance, but this, he gestured between them, this is real. Harper felt tears prick her eyes. I love both versions. Even when Work Adrian has to cancel plans for investor emergencies. Even then. Though I prefer Kitchen Adrian, who helps with dishes and talks about hypothetical future children. Adrian laughed, pulling her close. Kitchen Adrian is completely gone for Bookstore Harper, who cooks risotto and steals his sweatshirts. I don't steal them, Harper protested. I borrow them indefinitely. Keep them, Adrian said, his voice serious now. Keep whatever you want. This whole place is more yours than mine anyway. Harper looked around the penthouse, at her books splayed open on the coffee table, her favorite throw blanket draped over his pristine couch, her coffee mug in the drying rack. Without realizing it, she'd been making this place home. Adrian? He was nuzzling her neck now, his lips finding the sensitive spot behind her ear that made her knees weak. I think I might love you more than risotto. Adrian pulled back to look at her, eyebrows raised. More than your famous risotto? More than any risotto? Even the one at that fancy Italian place downtown? Damn, Adrian said solemnly. That's serious. Very serious, Harper agreed, then gasped as Adrian lifted her onto the kitchen counter, stepping between her knees. How serious, he asked, his hands settling on her hips, his voice dropping to that rough register that made her forget her own name. Serious enough to give you a key to my apartment, Harper said breathlessly. I already have a key to your apartment. Serious enough to let you reorganize my bookshelves. Now I know you're lying. You'd never let anyone reorganize your books. Harper laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. Okay, fine. Serious enough to admit that I've been thinking about kids too, and that when I imagine them, they have your eyes. Adrian went very still. Harper? Too much? She asked, suddenly uncertain. Instead of answering, Adrian kissed her with a passion that left her dizzy, his hands tangling in her hair, his body pressing closer like he couldn't bear any distance between them. Not too much, he said, when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Perfect. You're absolutely perfect. Later that night, they lay tangled together on Adrian's enormous bed, Harper's head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The city sparkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but Harper only had eyes for the man holding her close. Adrian? Yeah? When you picture our hypothetical future children, what do you see? Adrian was quiet for a moment, his fingers combing gently through her hair. I see Saturday morning pancakes with sticky little hands and syrup everywhere. I see you reading bedtime stories with all the character voices. I see teaching them to code and watching you teach them to love books. Harper smiled against his chest. That sounds perfect. What do you see? Harper closed her eyes, letting herself imagine. I see a house with a big kitchen and a yard for a dog. I see you being the kind of dad who builds epic blanket forts and never misses a school play. I see us being the kind of family where everyone feels safe and loved and heard. Where is this house? Adrian asked softly. I don't know. Somewhere between your world and mine. Somewhere that feels like home for all of us. Adrian's arms tightened around her. I can't wait to find it with you. As Harper drifted off to sleep in Adrian's arms, surrounded by the scent of his cologne and the warmth of his love, she knew they'd already found what mattered most. Home wasn't a place, it was this feeling of absolute belonging, absolute safety, absolute love. It was coming home to each other, every single day, for the rest of their lives. Harper knew something was different the moment Adrian walked into her bookstore. It was a Thursday afternoon in late November, rain pattering against the windows of Page and Prose, while Harper helped a regular customer find the latest mystery novel. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see Adrian standing in the entrance, his expensive coat dripping onto her worn wooden floors. But it wasn't his unexpected presence that made her pause. It was the expression on his face. Tense, excited, nervous energy radiating from him like heat. "Give me 5 minutes," he asked quietly, nodding toward the customer Harper was helping. Of course. Harper finished with Mrs. Chen, no relation to the forbidden Chen from Adrian's instructions, and watched her best customer of 10 years disappear into the rain with her weekly stack of books. When the store was empty except for the two of them, Adrian approached the counter where Harper stood, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. "You look like you're about to burst," Harper observed, studying his face. "Good news or bad news?" "I honestly don't know," Adrian admitted. "But it's big." Harper felt her stomach clench. Over the past month, they'd found their rhythm. Easy mornings in his penthouse, quiet evenings in her apartment, weekends exploring Seattle like tourists in their own city. She'd grown comfortable in the security of their love. Maybe too comfortable. "Tell me," she said. Adrian pulled a thick envelope from his coat, setting it carefully on the counter between them. The letterhead read Goldman Sachs in elegant serif font. "What is this?" Harper asked. "An offer," Adrian said. "Not for acquisition this time, for partnership." Harper's eyebrows rose. "Partnership? They want to back my new direction for the company. The educational technology, the accessibility tools, all of it." Adrian's voice was gaining energy as he spoke. "But they want to do it in a big way. 15 million in funding. Offices in 3 cities, a full development team. Everything I'd need to actually change how technology impacts education." Harper stared at the envelope, trying to process the magnitude of what he was saying. "Adrian, that's incredible. That's your dream." "Part of it," Adrian agreed. "But there's a catch." Of course there was a catch. Harper had learned to be wary of anything that seemed too good to be true in Adrian's world. "What kind of catch?" Adrian took a deep breath. "They want the headquarters in New York, and they want me there, overseeing everything personally, for at least the first 2 years. The words hit Harper like cold water. New York, 2,500 miles away from Seattle, from her store, from the life they'd built together. "Oh," she said quietly. "I know what you're thinking," Adrian said quickly. "But Harper, this could be it. This could be the chance to build something that actually matters, something that helps kids learn and grows and creates lasting change." Harper nodded, forcing a smile. "It sounds amazing. You should absolutely do it." Adrian studied her face. "What aren't you saying?" "Nothing. I'm happy for you. This is what you wanted." "Harper." Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. "Talk to me." Harper looked around her bookstore, at the mismatched shelves she'd painted herself, at the reading corner with its collection of worn armchairs, at the community bulletin board covered in local announcements and book club flyers. This was her world, small and imperfect and completely hers. "I can't leave this," she said finally. "The store, my customers, my life here." "I know that probably sounds small compared to changing the world through technology, but it doesn't sound small," Adrian interrupted. "It sounds like home." "It is home," Harper said, her voice breaking slightly. "This store has been my dream for 5 years. My customers depend on me, my staff depends on me. I can't just walk away." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and Harper could see him processing, calculating, trying to find a solution that didn't exist. "We could do long distance," he offered finally. "Flights between Seattle and New York, video calls, visits every few weeks." "For 2 years?" Harper's voice was small. "Adrian, we've been together for 4 months. Long distance for 2 years would destroy us. Not if we don't let it." Harper looked into his green eyes and saw the desperation there, the need to believe they could make this work. She wanted to believe it too, but she'd seen enough relationships crumble under much smaller obstacles. "When do they need an answer?" she asked. "Monday. 4 days." Harper felt something tight and panicky rise in her chest. "I should let you think about it," she said, moving around the counter to create some space between them. "This is your decision to make." "Our decision," Adrian corrected, following her. "Harper, this affects both of us." "Does it?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. "Because it sounds like you've already decided what you want to do." Adrian's expression shifted. "What do you mean?" "I mean you came here with that envelope, with that look on your face, talking about dreams and changing the world. You've already made up your mind." "I came here because I wanted to talk to you about it," Adrian said, his voice rising slightly. "Because I don't want to make any decision without you." "But if I wasn't a factor," Harper pressed, "if you were single and free to do whatever you wanted, you'd take this offer in a heartbeat." Adrian was quiet for a beat too long. "That's what I thought," Harper said, moving toward the store's back office. She needed space, needed air, needed to think without Adrian's presence clouding her judgment. "Harper, wait." Adrian caught her arm gently. "Yes, if I were single, I'd probably take it. But I'm not single. I'm in love with you, and that changes everything." "Does it? Or does it just complicate everything?" "Both," Adrian admitted. "But complicated doesn't mean impossible." Harper looked at him, really looked at him, at the excitement he was trying to hide, at the way he'd lit up talking about the offer, at the future he could see so clearly it practically radiated from his skin. "You want this," she said. "You want it more than anything." "I want you more than anything," Adrian said firmly. "But if you could have both," Adrian's silence was answer enough. "I need to think," Harper said finally, "and you need to think too, without worrying about what I want or need. This is your career, your future, our future." "Adrian," Harper's voice was quiet but final. "I love you, and because I love you, I want you to really consider what you'd regret more, taking this opportunity, or passing it up for me." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That's not a fair question." "It's the only question that matters." They stood in the narrow aisle between romance novels and local authors, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Harper could hear rain against the windows, could smell the familiar scent of old books and coffee from the shop next door, could feel her world and Adrian's pulling in opposite directions. "I should go," Adrian said finally. "Let you close up, give you space to think." Harper nodded, not trusting her voice. Adrian moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "Harper? Yeah? Whatever we decide, whatever happens, this has been the best 4 months of my life." Tears pricked Harper's eyes. "Mine too." After Adrian left, Harper stood alone in her bookstore, surrounded by thousands of stories about love conquering all, about couples who overcame impossible odds, about happy endings that felt within reach right up until they slipped away. She picked up the Goldman Sachs envelope Adrian had left behind, turning it over in her hands. Inside was an offer that could change everything, for Adrian, for his company, for the world he wanted to help shape, and possibly for them. Harper had told herself that love was about choosing each other, every day, no matter what. But what happened when choosing each other meant asking someone to give up their dreams? What happened when love meant letting go? She thought about Adrian's face when he'd talked about the offer, about the light in his eyes when he'd described building something that mattered. She thought about her own dreams, about the bookstore she'd poured her heart into, about the community she'd built one customer at a time. Could she ask him to stay and watch him slowly resent the opportunity he'd lost for her? Could she leave everything she'd built to follow him to a city where she'd be starting over, completely dependent on him? Harper sank into one of the reading chairs, the envelope still clutched in her hands, and tried to imagine a future where love was enough to bridge the gap between two very different dreams. Outside, Seattle settled into evening, the rain turning to mist that blurred the lights of the city. Inside Page and Prose, Harper Lewis sat surrounded by love stories and tried to figure out how her own was supposed to end. Because for the first time since she and Adrian had found each other, Harper wasn't sure love would be enough. The thought terrified her almost as much as the possibility that it might be true. Monday morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Harper stood at the window of her apartment, watching Seattle wake up in shades of grey and gold, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. She hadn't really slept since Thursday, since Adrian had walked into her store with that envelope and turned their perfectly imperfect world upside down. In 3 hours, Adrian would give Goldman Sachs his answer. In 3 hours, their future would be decided. Her phone sat silent on the coffee table. They hadn't spoken since Thursday, both needing space to think without the pull of each other's presence clouding their judgment. But the silence felt like a wound, growing deeper with each hour that passed. Harper had spent the weekend walking through her life with new eyes, really seeing her bookstore, her customers, her small corner of the world. Mrs. Chen had come in Saturday morning, asking after that handsome young man who'd been in on Thursday, Mr. Rodriguez had brought his daughter for their monthly book selection, the 8-year-old chattering excitedly about the fantasy series Harper had recommended. These people weren't just customers. They were her community, her chosen family, the roots she'd grown deep into Seattle soil. But every time Harper tried to imagine her life without Adrian, tried to picture him 3,000 miles away building his dream, while she stayed here building hers, her chest felt hollow and wrong. At 8 a.m. her phone rang. Not Adrian, Sage. Don't answer if you don't want to talk. Sage's voice was uncharacteristically gentle when Harper picked up. But I figured you could use someone who understands both sides of this mess. Hi, Sage, Harper said, surprising herself by feeling relieved to hear a familiar voice. He's miserable, Sage said without preamble. In case you were wondering. Hasn't eaten, hasn't slept, snapped at 3 different investors yesterday. The man is falling apart. Harper closed her eyes. He needs to take the offer. That's not what he needs, Sage said firmly. What he needs is to figure out what he really wants, instead of what he thinks he's supposed to want. The New York opportunity is incredible. The New York opportunity is impressive, Sage corrected. But Harper, I've worked with Adrian for 2 years. I've seen him excited about deals and funding and expansion. I've never seen him happy until you. Harper felt tears threaten. But if he stays, he'll find another way to change the world. If he goes and loses you, he'll spend the rest of his life wondering if success was worth losing his soul. The words hit Harper like a physical blow. Sage, I'm not telling you what to do, Sage continued, but I am telling you that some opportunities come around again. Some don't. Love like what you two have. That's once in a lifetime. After Sage hung up, Harper sat in her apartment paralyzed by the weight of decision. She thought about 18 years of friendship, about Adrian choosing her over Rebecca's $50 million, about the way he looked at her like she was his whole world. Then she thought about his face when he'd talked about the Goldman Sachs offer, about the light in his eyes when he'd described building something that mattered. At 10 a.m., Harper made a choice that terrified her. She was going to let him go. Harper arrived at Adrian's office building with 20 minutes to spare before his Goldman Sachs call. The elevator ride to the 20th floor felt like ascending to her own execution, each floor marking another step toward the hardest thing she'd ever have to do. Sage met her in the lobby of Nexus Technologies, her expression understanding and heartbroken. He's in his office, Sage said quietly. The call's in 15 minutes. Harper nodded, walking past the conference rooms and cubicles filled with the team Adrian had built, toward the corner office where the man she loved was about to make the biggest decision of his career. She found Adrian standing at his window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city spread below. He was wearing the navy suit she'd helped him pick out last month, his hair perfectly styled, every inch the successful CEO about to negotiate his future. But when he turned at the sound of her footsteps, Harper saw the boy she'd fallen in love with at 12, vulnerable, uncertain, needing her in ways that had nothing to do with business or success. Harper, he breathed, like her name was a prayer. Hi, she said, her voice already shaky. They stood there for a moment, drinking each other in, both knowing this conversation would change everything. I've been thinking, Harper said finally. Me too. You should take the offer. Adrian went very still. What? Harper forced herself to step closer to look into his green eyes as she broke both their hearts. The Goldman Sachs offer. You should take it. Harper, no, listen to me. Harper's voice was firm, despite the tears threatening to fall. I've spent the last 4 days trying to figure out how to make this work, how to ask you to stay, or how to convince myself I could leave. But Adrian, I've been asking the wrong question. What do you mean? I've been asking how we can stay together, But the real question is, what do you need to become the man you're meant to be? Adrian shook his head. I need you. You need to build something that matters, Harper corrected gently. You need to change the world through technology, help kids learn, create something bigger than yourself. That's who you are, Adrian. That's who you've always been, even when we were kids, and you were coding games in your bedroom. I can do that here. Can you? Harper asked. Really? Or would you always wonder what might have been if you'd taken the chance to do it the right way, with proper funding and support and scale? Adrian's jaw worked silently, and Harper knew she'd hit the truth he'd been trying to avoid. And I need to stay here, Harper continued, her voice growing stronger. I need my bookstore, my customers, my community. I need to grow something too, Adrian, just in a different way than you do. So what are you saying? Adrian's voice was rough with unshed emotion. I'm saying we love each other enough to want the best for each other, even if that means letting go. Harper, no. Adrian moved closer, reaching for her hands. We can make this work. Long distance, visits, whatever it takes. For how long? Harper asked gently. 2 years? 5? Until one of us gets tired of living half a life. Adrian was quiet, but his grip on her hands tightened. I won't be the reason you don't chase your dreams, Harper said, tears finally spilling over. And you can't be the reason I abandon mine. This is insane, Adrian said desperately. People make sacrifices for love all the time. They find ways to compromise. Some sacrifices are too big, Harper replied. Some compromises cost too much. So that's it? Adrian's voice broke. We just give up. Harper cupped his face in her hands, memorizing the feel of his skin, the way his eyes looked when he was vulnerable. We don't give up, she whispered. We love each other enough to let each other grow into who we're supposed to be. And maybe someday, Adrian repeated, like the word was made of glass. They kissed then, desperate, tender, tasting of tears and goodbye, and 18 years of love that would never really end. When they broke apart, both were crying. I love you, Adrian whispered against her forehead. I will love you for the rest of my life. I love you too, Harper replied. Always. Adrian's phone buzzed on his desk. The Goldman Sachs call. Harper stepped back, wiping her eyes, trying to compose herself. Take your call, build something amazing. Harper. I'll go first, Harper said, understanding that one of them had to be strong enough to walk away. Goodbye, Adrian. She made it to the elevator before the tears came in earnest, made it to her car before the sobs took over completely. As she drove through Seattle's familiar streets, Harper felt like she was leaving pieces of her heart scattered across the city. But underneath the grief was something else, a certainty that they'd made the right choice, even if it was the hardest one. 2 hours later, Sage called with the news Harper had been expecting. He took it, Sage said quietly. He's flying to New York tomorrow to start setting up operations. Good, Harper managed. That's good. Harper? Yeah? He asked me to tell you that this isn't how he wanted the story to end. Harper closed her eyes, fresh tears threatening. Tell him that sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones where two people choose each other's happiness over their own. I'll tell him. That evening, Harper stood in her bookstore after closing, surrounded by thousands of stories about love conquering all, about couples who overcame impossible odds, about happy endings that felt within reach. But as she locked up and walked home through the Seattle drizzle, Harper knew that love had conquered, just not in the way she'd expected. Love had been strong enough to set them both free to become who they were meant to be. Love had been big enough to choose growth over comfort, possibility over security, dreams over the easy path. It wasn't the ending Harper had written in her head during those perfect months of falling in love with her best friend, but it was, she realized with a strange peace settling in her chest, exactly the ending their story needed, even if it broke her heart to write it. 2 years later, Harper still came back to that park, but this time with peace in her heart. Green Lake stretched before her in the golden light of a Seattle autumn, its surface reflecting maple trees painted in shades of amber and rust. The bench where she sat was the same one where she and Adrian had shared countless conversations over the years, about dreams and fears, about the future that had seemed so certain when they were young. 2 years. 2 years since she'd walked out of Adrian's office and let love become something bigger than possession, bigger than need, bigger than the safe harbor they'd found in each other's arms. Harper opened the book in her lap, an advanced copy of Digital Bridges: How Technology Can Transform Education by Adrian Collins. His author photo on the back cover showed a man she recognized but who looked different somehow, older, more confident, with laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of genuine happiness. She'd followed his success from 3,000 miles away, through industry articles and Sage's careful updates. Nexus Educational had become exactly what Adrian had envisioned, a company that created learning tools for children with disabilities, apps that made coding accessible to kids in underserved communities, platforms that turned struggling students into confident learners. He'd been featured on magazine covers, given TED Talks that went viral, won awards for innovation in educational technology. He'd changed the world, just like Harper always knew he would. And she'd grown too in ways she hadn't expected. Page & Prose had evolved from a small neighborhood bookstore into something more, a community hub that hosted reading programs for adults learning English, book clubs for teenagers aging out of foster care, literacy workshops for parents who wanted to read bedtime stories to their children but had never learned how themselves. Last month, Harper had signed papers to open a second location in Tacoma. This one focused entirely on community outreach and educational programs. The Harper Lewis Foundation, named by her board of directors despite her protests, was being funded by a combination of city grants, private donations, and her own steady reinvestment of profits into something larger than herself. She'd learned that dreams could grow and change shape, that success didn't always look like what you'd imagined when you were young and thought you had all the answers. Her phone buzzed softly. A text from Sage, who'd become not just a business contact, but a genuine friend over the past 2 years. Sage, seeing my Seattle girl today. Adrian's in town for the tech conference. Thought you should know. Harper's heart stuttered, then settled into a steadier rhythm. She'd known this day would come eventually. Seattle wasn't big enough for someone of Adrian's stature to avoid forever, and she'd made peace with the possibility of running into him, or so she'd told herself. Harper, thanks for the heads up. How is he? Sage, good, really good. But Harper, he asks about you, every time we talk. Harper stared at the message, then at the book in her lap, then at the lake where she and Adrian had skipped stones as children, dreamed about the future as teenagers, fallen in love as adults. Harper, and what do you tell him? Sage, that you're amazing, that you're changing lives, that you're happy. Harper, am I? Sage, aren't you? Harper considered the question seriously. Was she happy? She thought about her morning routine, coffee and sunrise in her apartment that she'd finally redecorated to suit her own taste, rather than some magazine's idea of sophistication. She thought about her work, about Mrs. Chen, who now volunteered at the literacy workshops, about young Marco, who'd gone from struggling to read to devouring fantasy novels, thanks to her recommendation of graphic novel adaptations. She thought about the man she'd been seeing for the past 6 months, David Kim, a social worker who understood her passion for community building, who made her laugh over shared Thai takeout, who kissed her goodnight with gentle affection that felt safe and warm and utterly different from the earth-shattering intensity she'd shared with Adrian. Harper, yes, I think I am. Sage, he'd be glad to know that. Harper was about to put her phone away when another message appeared. Sage, the conference ends at 5. He's giving the keynote at the convention center. Just saying. Harper laughed despite herself. Sage had all the subtlety of a freight train when she decided to meddle. Harper, just saying what? Sage, that some stories don't end where you think they do. At 4:45, Harper found herself standing outside the Washington State Convention Center, Adrian's book clutched in her hands like a talisman. She'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, not because she was trying to impress anyone, she told herself, but because she wanted to feel confident walking into Adrian's world. The lobby was packed with tech professionals, venture capitalists and entrepreneurs who all looked like they belonged in magazines. Harper recognized several faces from business journals, people whose companies had been featured in the same articles that profiled Adrian's success. She found a seat toward the back of the auditorium, just as the lights dimmed, and a moderator took the stage to introduce the keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and CEO of Nexus Educational, Adrian Collins. The applause was thunderous as Adrian walked onto the stage, and Harper's breath caught in her throat. He was magnificent. 2 years in New York had refined him in ways that went beyond his perfectly tailored suit or his confident stride. There was a gravity to him now, a sense of someone who'd found their purpose and was living it fully. When he smiled at the audience, it was the smile of a man who knew exactly who he was and what he was meant to do with his life. But when his eyes swept the crowd and found hers, 20 rows back and trying to blend into the shadows, that polished exterior cracked just enough for Harper to see the boy she'd known for 18 years. Adrian stumbled slightly over his opening words, his gaze lingering on her face for a heartbeat longer than was appropriate, for a keynote speaker who'd just spotted someone in the crowd. Then he recovered, launching into a presentation about the intersection of technology and empathy, about building tools that served humanity rather than replacing it, about the responsibility that came with the power to shape how children learned and grew. Harper found herself mesmerized, not just by his words but by his passion. This wasn't the Adrian who'd been driven by success and recognition. This was someone who'd found meaning in his work, who spoke about changing the world not as a grandiose ambition, but as a daily responsibility. When he finished, the standing ovation lasted nearly 3 minutes. Harper slipped out during the applause, not ready for the conversation that would inevitably follow if she stayed. She made it to the lobby before she heard her name. Harper. She turned, and there he was, Adrian Collins, tech mogul and keynote speaker, looking at her like she was the only person in a room full of hundreds. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi yourself." Adrian moved closer, stopping just out of arm's reach. "Sage said you might be here." Sage has a big mouth. Sage cares about people she loves. Adrian's smile was gentle. She's not wrong about that being a rare quality. They stood in the bustling lobby, surrounded by conference attendees networking and making deals, but Harper felt like they were in their own private bubble. "You look—" Adrian paused, seeming to search for words. "You look radiant. Happy. Thank you. You look pretty good yourself." Harper gestured toward the auditorium. "That was an incredible presentation. You're doing exactly what you always dreamed of doing." "Some of it," Adrian agreed. "The work is everything I hoped it would be. The company's thriving. We're making real changes in how kids learn. It's been—" He paused. "It's been fulfilling in ways I didn't expect. But—" Harper heard the unfinished thought in his voice. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "But it turns out success is a lot less meaningful when you don't have anyone you really want to share it with." Harper's heart clenched. "Adrian, I'm not trying to reopen old wounds," Adrian said quickly. I needed you to know that letting you go was the right choice, and the hardest thing I've ever done." "I know," Harper whispered. "For me, too. Sage tells me you're opening a second location, that you're changing lives through literacy programs." Adrian's smile was proud and genuine. "I'm so glad you found your way to make a difference." "I learned from the best," Harper said. "You always knew that success meant more than just profit margins." "I learned that from you," Adrian replied. "From watching you build community one customer at a time, from seeing how you made every person who walked into your store feel important." The crowd around them was thinning as conference attendees moved toward evening networking events. Soon they'd be alone in the lobby, and Harper wasn't sure she was ready for the intensity that privacy would bring. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "Should you?" Adrian asked, and something in his voice made her pause. "Adrian, we can't—" "I know," he said quickly. "I know we can't go backwards, but Harper, I've missed my best friend. I've missed the person who knew me before any of this mattered, who could make me laugh when I took myself too seriously, who reminded me that there was more to life than the next deal or the next milestone." Harper felt tears threaten. "I've missed you too, so much. Have dinner with me," Adrian said. "As friends. Just let me catch up with the most important person from my past before I fly back to New York tomorrow." Harper knew she should say no, knew that seeing Adrian again, spending time with him, would stir up feelings she'd worked hard to settle into peaceful memory. But she also knew that some conversations were necessary for true closure, that some relationships deserved a proper goodbye instead of the painful severing they'd given themselves 2 years ago. "Okay," she said, "but somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can really talk." Adrian's smile lit up his entire face. "I know just the place." An hour later, they sat across from each other at Rosebud, a tiny restaurant in Capitol Hill that specialized in comfort food and had never cared that it wasn't trendy enough for Seattle's foodie scene. It was the kind of place Adrian never would have suggested when he was trying to impress investors. But it was perfect for two old friends trying to find their way back to honesty. "So," Adrian said after they'd ordered, "tell me about David." Harper nearly choked on her wine. "How did you—" "Sage mentioned you were seeing someone. Social worker, apparently. Sounds like a good guy." Harper studied Adrian's face, looking for jealousy or pain, but found only genuine curiosity and what looked like relief. "He is a good guy," Harper said carefully. "Kind, thoughtful, completely dedicated to helping families stay together." We've been dating for 6 months. Are you happy with him? The question was asked without agenda, with the same tone Adrian might have used to ask about her favorite new book or restaurant recommendation. I'm content with him, Harper answered honestly. It's different, peaceful. We have similar values, compatible lifestyles. We make sense together. But, Adrian prompted gently, but it's not. Harper paused, searching for words that wouldn't be unfair to David or painful for Adrian. It's not earth-shattering. It doesn't feel like coming home and going on an adventure at the same time? Adrian nodded slowly. I know what you mean. What about you? Anyone special in New York? I've dated, Adrian said with a rueful smile. Smart, successful women who understand my world, who can hold their own at investor dinners and charity galas, women who look perfect on paper. And none of them ever made me want to turn off my phone and spend an entire Sunday in bed talking about everything and nothing. Adrian's voice was soft. None of them ever felt like home. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in thought. Harper found herself studying Adrian's face, cataloguing the small changes 2 years had brought. He was still devastatingly handsome, but there was a maturity to him now that spoke of someone who'd been tested and found his own strength. Do you ever regret it? Harper asked finally. The choice we made? Adrian considered the question seriously. I regret the pain it caused both of us. I regret that we couldn't find a way to grow together instead of apart. But regret the choice itself? He shook his head. No. We both became who we needed to become. The question is whether we can find a way back to each other now that we know who that is. Harper's heart stopped. Adrian, I'm not asking you to uproot your life again, Adrian said quickly. I'm not asking you to choose between your dreams and me. But Harper, what if we didn't have to choose anymore? What do you mean? Adrian reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder that looked suspiciously like a business proposal. I mean, Adrian said, sliding the folder across the table, what if I told you that Nexus Educational is looking to expand into the Pacific Northwest? What if I told you that we want to partner with established community organizations to bring our literacy programs to underserved populations? Harper stared at the folder without opening it. Adrian, what are you saying? I'm saying that I've spent 2 years building something meaningful, and now I want to bring it home. I'm saying that the Harper Lewis Foundation's work with adult literacy and community outreach is exactly the kind of grassroots impact we need to partner with. Adrian's voice was growing more excited. I'm saying that I've been looking for an excuse to come back to Seattle for 2 years, and you just gave me the best one imaginable. Harper opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a detailed proposal for a partnership between Nexus Educational and the Harper Lewis Foundation, outlining funding for expanded literacy programs, technology integration for their community workshops, and a Seattle office that would serve as the company's West Coast headquarters. This is real, Harper whispered, scanning the numbers that would allow her foundation to serve 10 times as many people. This is real, Adrian confirmed. The board approved it last month. I fly back to New York tomorrow to formally announce the expansion, and if you say yes, I'll be back in Seattle permanently by New Year. Harper looked up from the proposal, seeing hope and uncertainty warring in Adrian's green eyes. And us? She asked quietly. What would this mean for us? It would mean, Adrian said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his, that we get a second chance to figure out if love is strong enough to bridge the gap between two people who've both grown into who they're meant to be. Harper felt tears slip down her cheeks. Adrian, I'm with David. I know, and I respect that. I'm not asking you to make any decisions about us right now. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe our story isn't over, that maybe we needed to become whole separately before we could be whole together. Harper stared at their joined hands, feeling the familiar electricity that had never quite faded, the sense of rightness that came from touching Adrian Collins. What if we try again, and it doesn't work, she whispered. What if we're too different now? Or what if we hurt each other worse than before? Then we'll know we tried, Adrian said simply, and we'll have built something beautiful together professionally, even if the personal doesn't work out. But Harper, his thumb traced across her knuckles, what if it does work? What if we're finally ready for the love we were too young and scared to handle before? Harper closed her eyes, feeling the weight of possibility settle around her like a warm blanket. She thought about David, sweet and safe David, who loved her gently but had never made her feel like she might die from the intensity of it. She thought about the past 2 years of careful, measured happiness, of a life that was good and meaningful, but had always felt like it was missing something essential. She thought about the girl she'd been at 17, dancing with Adrian at prom, and pretending her heart wasn't breaking with love she was too afraid to name. She thought about the woman she'd been at 30, walking out of his office because she loved him too much to hold him back from his dreams. And she thought about the woman she was now, 32, successful, confident in her own worth and power, no longer afraid of loving someone more than they might love her back. "I'll consider the partnership," Harper said finally, opening her eyes to meet Adrian's gaze. "It's an incredible opportunity for the foundation." Adrian nodded, hope and disappointment flickering across his features. "And I'll consider the rest too," Harper continued softly. "But Adrian, I need time. I need to figure out how to end things honestly with David, and I need to be sure I'm making this choice for the right reasons." "What would the right reasons be?" Harper smiled through her tears. "Because I'm ready for the kind of love that challenges me to grow instead of asking me to stay small. Because I've learned the difference between need and want, between settling and choosing. Because I love you not just for who you were when we were kids, but for who you've become as a man." Adrian's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "That sounds like pretty good reasons to me." "Don't get too excited," Harper warned, though she was smiling too. "I'm slow to make big decisions now. It's taken me 2 years to admit I was ready for this conversation." "I'll wait," Adrian said immediately. "I've waited 2 years already. I can wait as long as you need. What if I decide I can't risk it? What if I choose safety over possibility?" Adrian lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth shooting up her arm. "Then I'll accept that," he said quietly, "but I'll always be grateful that we got this chance to try again, that we got to see who we became when we followed our individual dreams." They walked out of the restaurant into the crisp Seattle evening, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement and the familiar scent of coffee and rain filling the air. Adrian walked Harper to her car, both of them moving slowly, reluctant to end this tentative reconnection. "Harper," Adrian said as she unlocked her door. "Yeah? Thank you for having dinner with me, for listening to the proposal, for giving me hope that maybe our story gets a different ending than the one we wrote 2 years ago." Harper looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who'd grown into everything she'd always known he could become, who'd followed his dreams and found success, but had come back for her anyway, at her first love, her best friend, the person who'd known her longest and seen her grow from girl to woman. "Adrian?" "Yeah?" "I love you," Harper said quietly. "I never stopped loving you. I just learned how to love myself too." Adrian's intake of breath was audible. "Harper, I'm not ready for promises or plans or anything more than this moment," Harper continued, "but I needed you to know that. Whatever happens next, you should know that you're the love of my life. You always have been." Before Adrian could respond, Harper stood on her tiptoes and kissed him softly. Not the desperate, passionate kiss of their past, but something gentler and more sure. A kiss that tasted like possibility and second chances, and the kind of love that was strong enough to survive growing apart and growing back together. When she pulled away, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too," he whispered. "Always." Harper smiled, feeling lighter than she had in 2 years. "I'll call you next week, after I figure some things out. I'll be waiting." As Harper drove home through the familiar streets of Seattle, she felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been knotted tight with loss and regret, finally beginning to loosen. She thought about David, about the difficult conversation they'd need to have. She thought about the partnership proposal that would change everything for her foundation. She thought about Adrian flying back to New York tomorrow to set in motion a plan that would bring him home. Most of all, she thought about second chances and the courage it took to reach for love when you'd already lost it once. Her phone buzzed with a text as she pulled into her apartment complex. "Adrian, sweet dreams. Harper Lewis." "Thank you for reminding me what home feels like." Harper smiled, typing back quickly. "Harper, sweet dreams, Adrian Collins. Thank you for showing me that some love stories are worth rewriting." 6 months later, Harper stood in the backyard of Adrian's new house in Wallingford, watching him attempt to assemble a grill, while their friends provided unhelpful commentary from lawn chairs scattered across the grass. "You're supposed to insert tab A into slot B," Sage called out, raising her beer in mock salute. "Not the other way around." "I have an MIT degree," Adrian replied, waving a wrench for emphasis. "I think I can figure out a barbecue grill." "Famous last words," Harper laughed, walking over to hand him the instruction manual he'd stubbornly ignored. Need help? From my brilliant partner who successfully manages 2 non-profit locations and somehow convinced the city to fund our joint literacy program. Adrian grinned at her. Never. Partner, Harper repeated, liking the sound of the word. They'd been officially together again for 4 months now. 4 months of careful rebuilding, honest conversations, and the kind of deep, mature love that came from 2 people who knew exactly what they were choosing. Business partner, Adrian clarified, though his smile suggested he meant more than that. Among other things, the backyard was filled with their combined friend groups, Sage and her girlfriend, several of Adrian's team from Nexus Educational, Harper's staff from both bookstore locations, neighbors who'd already adopted Adrian into their community. It felt like a celebration of everything they'd built separately and were now building together. Speech, someone called out as Adrian finally got the grill lit. No speeches, Harper protested, but Adrian was already grabbing a beer and climbing onto a lawn chair. Actually, Adrian said, raising his bottle, I do have something to say. The backyard fell quiet, everyone turning to look at him. Harper felt her heart flutter with anticipation and just a touch of nervousness. 6 months ago, Adrian began, I came back to Seattle thinking I was just expanding my business. I had no idea I was actually coming home to everything I'd been missing for 2 years. Harper felt tears prick her eyes as Adrian's gaze found hers. Some of you know that Harper and I have history. This earned a few chuckles from their friends. But what you might not know is that she taught me something important about love. She taught me that if you really love someone, you want them to grow, even if that growth takes them away from you. Adrian's voice grew softer, more intimate, though he was still addressing the whole group. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that growth brings them back to you better than they were before. Stronger, more sure of themselves, ready for the kind of love that builds rather than binds. Harper wiped away a tear, smiling up at the man who'd been her best friend, her first love, and now something even more precious, her chosen partner in building a life that mattered. So here's to second chances, Adrian continued, raising his beer higher. To love that's patient enough to wait for the right timing, to friends who become family, to work that feels like purpose, and to finding your way home to the person who makes everything else make sense. To Adrian and Harper, Sage called out, and the backyard erupted in cheers and applause. Later, after their friends had gone home, and they'd cleaned up the remnants of what Adrian declared the most successful housewarming party in Seattle history, Harper and Adrian sat on his back porch swing, watching stars appear over the city they both loved. That was a beautiful speech, Harper said, curled against Adrian's side with his arm around her shoulders. Did you like the part about second chances? I liked the part about being home. Adrian pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Any regrets? About David, about taking the risk on us again? Harper considered the question. Breaking up with David had been difficult but necessary, a conversation about timing and readiness and the difference between loving someone and being in love with them. He'd been hurt but ultimately understanding, and Harper hoped he'd find someone who could love him with the intensity he deserved. No regrets, Harper said firmly. Just gratitude that we both grew up enough to do this right. What does doing it right look like? Harper tilted her head to look at him. It looks like 2 people who are whole on their own choosing to build something together. It looks like supporting each other's dreams instead of competing with them. It looks like being honest about what we need and what we can give. It looks like this, Adrian agreed, gesturing to his house, to the life they were building in Seattle, to the partnership that was both professional and personal. It looks like choosing each other every day, not out of need, but out of genuine desire to share this life with each other. Harper smiled, thinking about their morning routine. Coffee in Adrian's kitchen while they discussed their respective schedules, kisses goodbye that lasted just a little too long, text messages throughout the day that ranged from practical updates to ridiculous observations about their co-workers. Adrian? I'm really happy. Yeah? Yeah. The kind of happy that feels sustainable, like we built it on solid ground this time. Adrian's arms tightened around her. I love you, Harper Lewis. All of you. The woman who runs literacy programs for immigrants, the friend who still brings me soup when I'm sick, the partner who challenges me to be better at work and at life. I love you too, Harper replied. All of you. The CEO who's changing how kids learn, the man who assembles grills with inappropriate confidence, the person who came home to Seattle because it was where he belonged. They sat in comfortable silence, both thinking about the journey that had brought them here, from children who dreamed big to adults who'd learned that the biggest dreams were often about love and community and building something meaningful together. Harper? Yeah? Thank you for giving us another chance. Harper smiled, thinking about all the chances that had led to this moment. The chance encounter at his launch party that started everything, the painful choice to let each other go, the courage to try again when they were ready. Thank you for being worth the risk. As Seattle settled into evening around them, Harper Lewis and Adrian Collins held each other on a porch swing and marveled at the strange, beautiful way love could evolve. They'd started as children who'd found friendship, grown into adults who'd found passion, and finally become partners who'd found the kind of love that was both anchor and sail, grounding them in something solid while still allowing them to grow. It wasn't the fairy tale ending Harper had imagined when she was young and thought love was supposed to be simple. It was better, more complex, more honest, more real than any story she'd ever read. And as the first stars appeared over the city they'd both chosen as home, Harper knew that their story was just beginning. Some love stories, she realized, were worth rewriting as many times as it took to get them right. This one finally was. The end. Would you have made the same choice? What would you have done in their place? Sometimes the most beautiful love stories are about growing apart so you can grow back together. Sometimes coming home means leaving first. Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time. She pretended to be the millionaire's girlfriend for one night, and he crossed every line. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the